Zohare, who is founding director of DigiMaraCon. Please.
Hi, can everyone hear me? Yes. Cool. Okay. I know it's approaching lunchtime, so I will try my best to keep this as engaging and as brief and as sort of relevant as possible. Before I start, can I just get a sort of show of hands from people? How many of you are in a function or a role that deals directly with customer engagement or influences customer engagement policy or strategy? Nice and high. Come on, guys. Okay, so maybe 30% of the room. Okay. All right. I'm going to be talking about something that I think has not necessarily been covered. I'm not sure if this is something that gets talked about a lot, but it is something that we deal with on a day-to-day basis. Most of our companies have some form of interface with external entities, whether they're customers or partners or stakeholders. So without further ado, okay, so we have the animations. Cool. Okay. All right. So the theme of the presentation is basically kind of understanding there's a complex environment that we're all a part of. People are connected to businesses and brands and their likes and dislikes through various interfaces and technologies and sort of channels. Their needs are very complex as well. Everyone here is a consumer as well outside of their workspace. And so you also have needs and wants that, as the previous gentleman was speaking about, that we all need to sort of indulge every once in a while. People are doing that constantly. So as a business, for us to be prepared to be able to handle that, manage that in an effective way is extremely critical. Is this something that anybody recognizes? Show of hands. Has this ever happened to you? Have you ever done this? Have you ever waited so long that you wanted to squirt ketchup in someone's face and say, you know what, I don't want the fries? This is a picture that I've carried with me for a long time. I think this is a little bit late now, but anyway, we're going to be talking about the life and times of digital customer service. Once upon a time, I used to call this social care, but I had a lot of pushback from some colleagues in a previous organization because they felt it was too close to caring for the elderly. And so we had to work on different terminology. But in previous organizations, especially in telco, where I've spent a lot of time, we used to deal with this as a social care, using social media as a customer service channel. A little bit about me. I am the founding director of Digital Street, and it's a company that we started about 3.5 years ago. We're based in Dubai. We deal with a lot of things. I'll talk about that at the end. Just to give you a bit of background on my experience, I've worked with telco, with education, with in marketing and digital roles, project management, and so forth. Okay, so let's analyze a sad story. Somebody here is definitely going to be relating to one aspect of this at some point in their life. You call a customer service hotline, you're waiting, you're pushing the IVR buttons, nobody's answering, you have to, it's like a maze, and it's a nightmare. This is something that hasn't really evolved or changed very much, but like water or fish in water, people will gravitate towards options that work for them. And so over time, various other channels open up as well. And through history, of course, we know that you've had walk-in options, you've had email, you've had telephone, you've had social media, which emerged a few years ago as well. But they're not effective across the board, universally speaking. Some organizations may be excelling, some of them may be setting the standards, but by and large, this is an area that is a constant pain point. And as customers, this is something that we're always upset about. So, to sum it up, customer service is often something that can be described in a couple of words. For most, and the time that you actually have to interact with the customer service channel for an organization, it's dreaded, I think. I mean, we've all had those experiences where, we have a service provider, I don't want to name any names, but, you have a service provider at home or at your workplace or wherever, and you're always hoping that, you can do whatever you need to do remotely, you don't have to interact with anyone, walk up to a shop or to, send them an email and not receive a response. So it's something that we think about a lot only when we need to, but other times we're hoping that we don't have to. this presentation. The context is very important because a lot of people are writing about brands commercially, and a lot of people are influenced by that content, and it helps them to generate some share of voice, but that can be good or bad, and it depends on what's being said. And it's really important to keep that context in mind because at the end of the day, customer service isn't just a definition in a book. It's a mindset. It's a shift in the way that you think and behave. It's a paradigm that within an organization has to sort of coexist within all the organizations from the top to the bottom. It's not a group of people who work and answer phones and respond to emails and tweet back to customers, but there's this ethos that exists within the organization that we're going to be here because we care for our customers and we're going to do things that are going to enable them to be better or more loyal to our brand. Not because we sell better products to them or because they give us a good reason to stay in business or we're doing the right things to retain them, but because there's trust, again, reflecting on what was said earlier. So just a very short story about how I got into this space. In 2009, I was working with a company called Ooredoo Group, which used to be Qatar Telecom. I was working with a subsidiary of theirs. We were launching an internet service provider. And I had this idea that I would start using social media as a customer engagement tool. I was in a marketing and a PR function. So I went to the CEO, and the CEO was a very traditional man. Very senior, very experienced, spent a lot of time with the group, and I said, this is what I want to do. I want to open up a Facebook page and I want to start a Twitter account. This is in 2009, so this is the time when people were still saying, yeah, my kids do that with social media. It's not really seen as a serious business tool. And so he basically sat me down and said to me that, listen, I don't want to expose our brand to the world, because if people have the opportunity to say things that they want to directly to us, the rest of the world will see that, and that'll expose us, and that could put us in jeopardy. So if you do this at the peril of losing your job. And I said, okay, fine. And so I took the chance, and we moved forward. And fortunately, I didn't lose my job. Instead, we were able to transform the way that customer service was managed, not just at the telephone center or the call center or at the shop fronts, but we were able to, over a few years, unify the way that customer service was managed by integrating sales, marketing, and customer service under one sort of structure, and having a way of managing customers that were coming in through the digital pipeline as well. I don't know if people feel this or have this sentiment, but complaints are something that we should be relishing. It's free feedback. It's something that people are giving us voluntarily. But if we're not acting on it, then obviously it could be counterproductive. So I do believe that they are gifts, and I'll talk about that briefly as well. So let's look at how to fix this. So digital customer service is not as complicated as a lot of people may think it is. And if you feel like there's something that isn't checked here, it's not because this is meant to be the perfect checklist. It's just meant to be kind of a cross-section of the things that we should be thinking about when we're thinking about offering customer service. These are the basic fundamentals of any business that's trying to communicate externally or internally. Engaging your employees as well as your customers is just as important. And so if you have any of these channels available in your business, or you're providing external communication through any of these channels, then I think you're doing all right. But the challenge is not necessarily being present in these spaces, but is also, are you using them effectively in a cohesive way to be able to engage the customers or be able to provide the service that they want in an efficient way, in a way that actually benefits the business as well as the customer's needs. So, when you look at the statistics of the scenario right now, and we're all in this room because we have common backgrounds or we are interested in the same things, but this is a very small sample of the rest of the community in Dubai, and an even smaller fraction of UAE, and so on and so forth. So when you look at the statistics of how this stuff is actually working on a more larger scale, it's not. And this is just one number, and this is just one channel. You have so many different touch points for customers. They're not being utilized properly because customers are making noise, but nobody's listening and nobody's acting on them. So one of the challenges that we need to look at is by starting first at where this kind of transpired. And now these are not necessarily all milestones in a 10-year period. This is kind of my decade with digital customer service. And having been in the space as long as I have, I feel like I have a very intimate relationship with it, just because I've seen it grow and I've understood it from behind the scenes. So in 2008, when I got involved in this space, things were very nascent. There wasn't a lot going on. But eventually, as the demand started to grow from social media for customers to be accessible or accessed by the brands, then the brands then started to identify that need to respond. So it was kind of, the push came from the customer, obviously. It wasn't something the brands decided, hey, you know what, we should be active on these channels because that's a good use of money. It was actually probably the opposite. I'm sure some of you will agree with that. But there's a very small number of companies that actually do engage with customers through a customer service channel that's set up or dedicated to social media. And this is something that I personally have really worked hard myself in my previous organizations to work and change, because I think that there's a huge opportunity for us to be able to engage customers in a more effective way. So when you look at the rest of the decade, then you see that things actually started to change because people were effective in their desire to reach the brands. 2019 and onwards, I think, is going to be an interesting space, because one of the things that I'm very interested in seeing is the shift from customer service to customer experience. And there is a fundamental difference between these. I recently watched a video while I was doing some research, again for this, where they were defining the fundamental difference between customer service and customer experience. And they're poles apart, because one is almost reactive while the other one is proactive. You're trying to build, or you're trying to engage the customer's mindset into the way that you operate. So it's about loyalty, it's about retention, it's about long-term relationships, your LTV, and so forth. But if only 5% of customers are actually voicing their complaints, the other 95 are probably just complaining to their friends and family, and so that has an aggregate noise that you are not capitalizing on, you're not able to capture. And so one of the challenges there is then how do you get that noise into your feedback books, and how do you action that? Do you go by reputation, because there's a reputation in the market for a brand and people feel or think a certain way about them? Or do you conduct market research and brand sentiment analysis so that you can understand exactly how people feel about you? It's difficult because even surveys don't give you the full picture. So when you look at 2011 and you look at how the journey sort of evolved, customer service, the need for customer service, and the identification of customer service through social media was something that was happening, but it was a very small amount. And as the years started to go by, that amount started to increase slowly. And it wasn't necessarily that brands were responding or answering the questions, but it was that people were using those because they demanded that, or it was easier for them. It's easier for me to go on Twitter and address a company than to find their email address from their website and then compose an email and write this whole thing, because maybe it goes to an empty well, and I may never get a response, and I've got better things to do with my time anyway, so why should I use my time to do that? So I think that the need for customer service is essentially going to become the majority of how brands are engaging, if it's not already happening. A lot of the larger brands, McDonald's, Starbucks, KLM, which is one of the best case studies, by the way, in this space, they have been leading this in many ways, in many shapes. So it's important as a brand for us to study how they're doing it and what are the things that they're putting into place. Obviously, you can't replicate their actions because they're putting a lot of money and resource behind this, because they really believe in this. But believing in something is kind of the starting point. You get the management on board, but there's this whole sort of process and cycle. But that's really not it. One of the challenges, just touching on the earlier Facebook statistic, when you look at a channel like Twitter, the responsiveness of brands is still very, very slow. And the problem with that is that it actually, you see that this leads to a lot of loss in customers as well. So, when you're talking about keeping customers, it's about engaging them when they need to be engaged with, and it's about talking to them when they want to be spoken to, and giving them the things that they want so that they feel like they're being loved and they're being cared for. But this is not something that's being done effectively. And when you look at the reasons why, you understand that there's this dichotomy between how a brand perceives it needs to behave with customers versus how customers want to be engaged with by themselves. And an interesting statistic here, you'll see that proportionally brands that make fun of their customers or ridicule them online, they're the least liked, but the ones who are using media content to engage with them are the most liked. So GIFs go a long way, I suppose, as long as they're benefiting the customer. So let's take a look at how we can deal with digital customer service disasters. As I mentioned earlier, the customers getting complaints is a gift, but the problem is that you need to first get a lot of complaints in order to be able to sort of analyze them and start to understand exactly how you can sift through and look at the how you can manage them. But when you have this exposure where all these other people are looking at the way the brands are being engaged with by their consumers, you're seeing this kind of spectator sport that's starting to happen. It's like being in a boxing match or a wrestling match where people are engaging with brands, and then everyone else is just watching. And sometimes that influences those people to behave or respond in a certain way as well. And so being considerate of that is also a very important aspect, because if you're not controlling the narrative, or if you're not steering it in a positive direction, it's going to be damaging for you. So, for example, if somebody is responding to or sending you a tweet or a message on one of the social channels, the key is to sort of acknowledge and respond and take it offline, move it into a direct message or into emails or whatever, so that you're not kind of exposing yourself to more complications. But one of the things that we really need to keep in mind here is also that the exponential factor of unhappy customers multiplies very quickly, and things sometimes escalate so rapidly that it's almost impossible to sort of counter that. And so you need to have a kind of sort of feet on the ground and thinking very quickly about what to do when a situation gets out of hand. When the fire is burning wild, you can't just pour water on it. You need to start putting things into action. Sometimes maybe you just need to accept that there was a mistake made, and you can say, hey, listen, I'm sorry, this was my fault, and as a brand I apologize to you, and we'll make amends, or we'll do things to improve that engagement for you. Domino's had this experience a few years ago where, I don't know if any of you are familiar, 2 employees made a video of making pizzas in a Domino's kitchen, and they were doing all kinds of dirty things with the food. They're throwing things in it, dirty things, and they made the video, and the video went viral. And obviously the employees were fired, the Domino's CEO came online, and issued an apology. This is the kind of thing that organizations that feel responsible for managing customer trust and engagement are going to do in order to retain their customers' trust. But at the same time, you have people who will troll you. They will come and badger you. They will give your brand a hard time. And so having a bit of a sense of humor is also very important. It's not the way that you should define your brand, which is funny because this is almost the opposite of the earlier statistic, where when you're ridiculing a customer, the brand is not going to be seen as very popular. And yet, when you look at the metrics, well, that one doesn't have any, and it should. But when you look at the metrics, it seems to sort of suggest otherwise. Leadership in the customer service world believes that customer service and social media is something that is to be taken seriously, because it's something that we need to be cognizant of. Customer loyalty is derived from how actively you engage them when they need to be engaged with. Because if you don't, things escalate. And when they escalate, they go out of control, and when they go out of control, then you're working backwards. So proactively engaging with your customer expectation is a very important thing. I'm going to play a short video, just very briefly, and then I'll tell you what this is about. If anyone is familiar with this, please keep your hand up for a second. Read about you. Any show of hands? Anybody recognize that? Anybody familiar with that? 1, 2. That's it. 3, 4, 5. So for the majority of you that don't know what this is, This, I think, for me was a landmark shift in my career as well, because this is kind of one of the things that really kind of drove me to become more serious about the space. These guys, it's a small band from Canada, they wrote this song. They were a small band. I mean, people in their town knew them. And this actually happened, and so the song actually was made. And as a result of that, they, they reached about 18 million views. Well, this is a current statistic, but when this video sort of skyrocketed back in the day, this video was published in 2009, and you can see the timestamp there. I think within 30 days, this thing had reached about 13 million views. And I mean, this isn't the time before Gangnam Style, So we're not talking billions of clicks in a factory. We're talking real views of people who are like, wow. And if any of you follow airline news or aviation news, you'll know that airlines in the US are getting badgered all the time because of customer service issues. And it's happening across the board. All the touch points are being blasted. But when you use a channel like, I mean, these guys are musicians, and they're using video to reach an audience of people and say, hey, listen, you know what? United doesn't care. Let's see if anyone else thinks. And they got a lot of support. I mean, this is just like barely a fraction of the kind of engagement that they got for this. But the impact on United, as you can see, was quite significant as well. Stock prices fall all the time, but when you're influencing an entire aviation industry to be affected by some guys whose guitars broke, you have to take something seriously. I mean, there's something obviously very valid about this. So, oops. Sorry about that. So, what do we need to do? We need to turn things around. We need to get, the thumbs up. We need to get the green badges, and the things that we need to put into place are very important, because at this point we've understood that there is a problem. It's dangerous. It can hurt us. What do we do going forward? How do we take that and transform it into something that benefits us? How do we control the narrative? We understand the tools and the platforms that have services or functionality that enable us to be able to engage our customers more effectively. We employ skills and capabilities that allow us to be able to be available everywhere, even if we're using technology, whether it's AI or machine learning, to be able to intelligently engage people and understand exactly what's being said, where it's being said. And to quote Jay Baer, who's a very well-known thought leader in this space, to get fewer complaints, you first need to get a lot of complaints. So you can sift through and understand what are the common things that are being said. How do we develop that frequently asked questions list so that we can proactively address people's concerns before they actually become concerns? And I do recommend that you read his book, Zohare Haider, because, and I haven't read it, I'll be honest, but I've read excerpts of it, and there are a lot of anecdotes and useful insights that you can actually use to get started today. But these, for me, I think are the 6 critical sort of, this is the toolkit that I would use if I was going to be employing digital customer service in my business. Size or scale irrelevant. You need to listen everywhere. There are tools to do this for you. Set up Google Alerts or social mention with certain keywords. Upscale and upscale, you need to get the right kind of resources in, give them empowerment, give them flexibility, give them time to learn and get involved so that they can actually drive that listening and that proactive response, very proactively, I guess. First, interaction response. This is, I'm not sure if this is, I don't think this is really a commonly used sort of term, but this is something that I've worked with. If anyone in the customer service function understands SLAs or service level agreements with, responding to customers, you try and keep it above 90%, which means that people who are calling into your customer service center or emailing you, you're responding to at least 90% of them within the first instance, and you're giving them some resolution. So you'll get a survey from a company that's asking how effective their customer service team was. They'll give you some options to grade them. The trick is really sort of if somebody's contacting you through one of the digital channels, respond to them, acknowledge that there was something that was wrong, and take them offline so that you can have a more elaborate discussion. Don't do it in the public space because you could expose yourself. As we've seen, that can be very dangerous. You need to get management buy-in. This is one of the biggest challenge areas. A lot of organizations are not giving their teams the kind of flexibility or power or the budgets to move forward with this because the management doesn't believe that it's necessary. I'm an example of that. But you have to sort of believe in it, and you have to be able to give good examples so that they say, hey, you know what, this could happen to us as well. So how do we control that? We get everybody on board, and we show them how this scenario could actually have negative ramifications for the entire organization, affecting jobs and loyalty and so forth. integrate the functions that are most responsible for revenue, customer engagement, and promoting your brand or your product. You can't sell anything unless you can establish trust. Again, borrowing from my previous speaker, it is a really important aspect, because if people don't trust you, they're not going to engage with you. And you can do whatever advertising you want, you can do whatever you want to try and get their attention, but at the end of the day, it's really irrelevant because they've lost you. I don't know if you know this ratio of 7 to 1, where if you spend, let's say, $1 to get a customer, you'll spend $7 to reacquire them, because that $6 gap in between is what you spent to regain their trust, because that's how badly you disappointed them. So why waste that money in the first place? And then quality check that, so your QC process is very important, so you need to make sure that the kind of response or engagement that you're giving customers are in line with your company's ethos, and they're in line with the way that you want your customer base or your audience to feel about you, or it's at least moving in that direction, so there's this positive drive. So the two things that I feel are very important after this are really kind of the response timing and the response type. The timing is important because things are important very briefly, so you need to tackle them then, and that's the best time because it's now. And the type is of course important because it's how you engage with them. What are you saying to them? Do you have standard responses? Are you saying the same thing to every customer, and is every customer seeing that same thing being said repeatedly? Feels like a robot is engaging with customers, that's not going to work either. You need to tailor them. You need to personalize the responses as well. It takes a little time and effort, but it gets done. So when you take a look at an example of KLM, who, as I mentioned earlier, is a leader in this space, and I'm not even kidding about that. And an earlier slide in the timeline, you would have noticed, if you caught that, in 2003, Social Bakers, if any of you are familiar, they established a standard called social devotion, or socially devoted brands. It was a kind of a standard that they obviously were pushing because they wanted to be seen as one of the leaders in analytics for social media. It was a great standard. I've believed in it for as long as they've had it. It's a seal of approval that says that you are responding to your customers' problems. They're measuring sentiment. It was at that time only available for English, but now I think they're available in 16 or 17 languages. Social devotion is something that indicates whether or not you're taking care of your customers online. And so doing that is very important. KLM has been number one for the longest time. Now they're not. And incidentally, back then telco was at the bottom of the list, and now telco is number one. Across the board, the industry of telecom is leading in customer service online because their dollars are being hurt very badly. If any of you are in telecom, you know what I'm talking about. The dumb pipe is done. Look at how much money these guys must be spending. 200 people, 13 language support, they're supporting 100,000 messages. And these statistics are from 2 years ago. So things have obviously changed a lot since then as well. And in the airline industry, as many of you will be aware, the industry is being hurt very badly. And so the desperation for retaining customers and keeping their attention and their loyalty is higher than ever. And the cost of keeping planes in the air is higher than ever because there are not enough people flying, it seems, but I don't think that's the case. These are just, I'm not going to dive into these too much, but it's just to kind of establish that there's a need, because it's not like you're not going to move forward if you don't proactively deal with your customers. If you deal with them positively, you're probably going to get positive ROI. And if you don't, you're going to go in the negative, so you're not going to stay in the neutral space. You need to be proactive, you need to be dealing with your customers' problems, because at the end of the day, you're moving forward. And to touch on my earlier point about customer service becoming customer experience, it's not just about, hey, you have a problem, I'll solve it, check out the hook one that easier resolves it. It's more about being proactively anticipating your customer's needs and tapping into those desires and turning them into delight. So rather than a customer contacting you because they're upset with you, they should be contacting you because they're happy with you, because they love what you do for them, and because the things that you're doing for them are things that are actually driving them to talk about you more proactively to other people. Because at the end of the day, isn't that what we want? I mean, isn't that the thing that we want? Spend less money in customer service and more on delighting customers, because in the end it's all interconnected, but understanding the divisions and the fine lines between those spaces is fundamental to any business. So this brings me almost to the end of my presentation, but I'd like to share with you a small story, a personal story, and it's something that I think taught me a great lesson as well. It wasn't very long ago. I think it was in 2014. My wife and I were traveling to Sri Lanka, and I booked a hotel. I was going there for a workshop, and we were going to have a few days off. So we decided to go to the east part of the island, which had recently opened up. It was a little kind of a bay, which is beautiful, untapped. There are a few hotels over there. There's an amazing hotel called Uga Bay. They are a luxury hotel. They have these private sort of semi-villa type, constructed properties. And I thought, wow. I thought I was spending $300 for a 3-night stay, so it's $100 a night. And I mean, I'm talking like, all the bells and whistles. This was top of the line. I was like, this is good bang for my buck. So I booked this hotel, and we land in Colombo, and we drive to the other part of the island, 7 hours in a car. Everything's great. We see our elephants crossing the road, and we stop and have our local food. And we're almost at our destination, and suddenly a thought hits my head because I'm checking my booking. And my booking says, you have 1 night stay. And I was like, hang on a second. What am I going to do for the other 2 nights? And how am I going to tell my wife this? She's going to kick my back. And so I thought hard, and then I was honest, and I said, this is what's happening. Panic, obviously, but we figured it out. I booked another hotel that was nearby because we needed to sort that out. Anyway, we got to the hotel, and for some reason, I don't know why, I'm a terrible customer, and I'm the guy who's telling you that we should be better to our customers. I'm the worst kind of customer. I am absolutely the pits. You don't want me as your customer, because I went and turned that around and made it the hotel's fault. And I went to them and I said to them that it's insane. How can you be charging $300 a night, for a hotel room? Because it is. I mean, come on, that's crazy money. And you thought you're going for a cheap holiday, you end up spending a lot more money than you anticipated. And I did this after I wrote them a negative review on TripAdvisor. And the only reason I had that conversation with them to tell them that this was their fault, when it wasn't, was because I was foolish not to see, the number of days that booking was going to give me. But they saw the review on TripAdvisor. This all happened within 5 hours. We arrived there around 7 in the evening, and I thought we're going to check out at about 10 in the morning the next day, so we're really getting 24 hours here. So I'm basically spending like some crazy amount of money per hour. This is insane. Even, there wasn't even a fruit basket in the room. I mean, come on, this is ridiculous. So I wrote this review on TripAdvisor. We're fuming, we're looking for every reason why we can pin this on them. Because that's how customers are. We're unreasonable, we're irrational, we're absolutely brutal. And I went on TripAdvisor and I just laid it out. But I did accept that I made the mistake of booking incorrectly. But then the rest of the stuff, I amplified it so much that the fruit basket was more important than the fact that I was spending $300 a night. And the management contacted us the same night. Got a call from the senior manager, the hotel general manager. It's a chain of hotels. It's owned by a very big group. I didn't know that. And he got in touch with us, and then he asked us to come down to the reception and meet with him. So we went, we met with him. He was apologetic. What the heck? It was my fault. And I felt bad about it, and I was honest about it, but I was just so upset at myself, I think. And these guys, unbelievable. And this was, I think, transformative. For me, this is about customer service. It doesn't matter whether it happens offline or online, it's about how they feel about you. And what they did the next 3 days was absolutely amazing. And we still stayed at the next hotel because they couldn't put us up because the bookings were actually, all the rooms were booked. But they asked us to come back that night in the evening. They would give us transport. The hotel was just down the road along the beach, but they said that they would give us transport and bring us back to the hotel. And so for the next 2 nights, they brought us back to the hotel and fed us dinner. The first night they gave us, unlimited, beverages and food, which was fantastic, but it was part of the buffet. The next night was absolutely outstanding. They gave us a private candlelit dinner on the beach for 2 with unlimited barbecue seafood. I'm talking a lobster each, shrimps, the works. And that in itself, that dinner in itself must have been worth twice the amount of money that I spent on the thing. My point is that when you want to, you can go beyond the extra mile, because that's how you feel about your customers. And for a hotel like that to take a customer experience like mine, which was of my own making, and turn it into something that blew my mind, I cannot help but say, you know what, these guys are the best. And why? Because I was silly. Because I made a bad booking. And so that brings me to the end of my presentation. I'm going to play a very short video because obviously self-promotion is important. It's very brief. Just to give you guys an idea of what we do. And, we're basically a brand marketing agency, and we're based in Dubai. We have an office in Islamabad, Pakistan now as well. A small team. We specialize in everything, but we work with a very handful of customers and businesses because we believe that doing work with better quality is a bit more important than having a long list of the best customers in the world. However, just to give you a sense of our history, so the idea of starting the company came when I was exhibiting another startup at the 2014 Web Summit in Dublin, Ireland. If you don't know about this event, I urge you to look it up. It's really cool. And the idea of starting the company was really to kind of help fund another business, but that turned on its head, and now we have what I'd like to think is a humble but fairly successful and well-reputable organization. We have a good list of clients. We're based in Silicon Oasis in Dubai, and who are also our client. And we love working with brands and businesses to do pretty much anything from strategy to content to solving customer problems and so forth. And I'm going to leave you all with this quote that I found about Zappos. And if you don't know about Zappos, the shoe company, I urge you to look them up, because if anybody's setting the standard in customer service, it's these guys. They believe that customer service is more important than anything about their business, even their products. So thank you very much, and I'll make my way off the stage. And if you have any questions, we're over there in the corner, I think number 4. So come and find us if you want to chat. Thank you very much for your attention and time.
Thank you very much, Zohare. And I think we're starting to see a bit of a theme about digital marketing trends here happening, not just locally, but also globally, in the customer